The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Queen Camilla stepped out of the royal limousine. Her elegant navy blue coat fluttered gently in the autumn breeze, and her signature pearl necklace caught the light as she walked with measured steps toward the ceremonial platform. Today was different from other royal engagements. Today, she would witness something that had never happened before in the long history of the British monarchy. The crowd gathered outside the palace gates was larger than usual. Word had spread through social media and news outlets that Queen Camilla would be attending a special ceremony honoring the royal guards who had served with distinction during recent international missions. What the public didn't know was that this ceremony would become a moment that would change how people viewed their queen forever. As Camilla approached the platform where senior military officials waited, she noticed the tension in the air. The royal guards stood in perfect formation, their red tunics immaculate and their black bearskin hats positioned precisely. These were men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting the royal family, often putting themselves in dangerous situations without recognition or fanfare. Colonel Harrison, the commanding officer, stepped forward to greet the Queen. His weathered face showed years of military service, and his chest displayed numerous medals earned through decades of loyal service. He bowed respectfully as Camilla extended her hand. "Your Majesty, the guards are ready for inspection," Colonel Harrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect throughout his career. Camilla nodded gracefully, but those close to her could see something different in her eyes today. There was a determination, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there during previous ceremonial visits. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, consulting with military historians and former guards to understand the true meaning of honor and sacrifice. The Queen began her walk along the line of guards, each soldier standing at perfect attention as she passed. Their eyes looked straight ahead, following centuries of military protocol. But Camilla was observing more than just their posture and uniforms. She was looking into their faces, seeing the individual stories behind each uniform. She paused in front of Sergeant Williams, a young woman whose family had served in the military for 3 generations. The sergeant had recently returned from a peacekeeping mission where she had shown exceptional courage under fire. Camilla had read her service record the night before and was moved by the sacrifices this young woman had made for her country. Moving down the line, the Queen stopped before Corporal Matthews, a veteran who had served in multiple deployments and had recently lost a close friend in service. His stoic expression couldn't hide the pain in his eyes, something Camilla recognized from her own experiences with loss and grief. As she continued her inspection, the crowd outside the gates grew restless. They could see the ceremony taking place but couldn't hear the conversations or understand the significance of what was unfolding. Camera crews from various news outlets had gathered, expecting a routine royal appearance with predictable speeches and formal handshakes. Queen Camilla reached the end of the line and turned to face the assembled guards. The autumn wind had picked up, causing the royal standard to flutter dramatically against the grey London sky. She looked at each face once more, these men and women who had sworn an oath to protect and serve, often at great personal cost. "Colonel Harrison," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "I have a request." The colonel stepped forward, slightly surprised by the deviation from the planned ceremony script. "Yes, Your Majesty? I would like to address the guards directly, if I may." This was not part of the scheduled program. Royal protocol typically involved the Queen receiving reports and making brief, formal remarks before departing. But there was something in her tone that suggested this moment was more significant than anyone had anticipated. Colonel Harrison nodded, though confusion flickered across his face. He called the guards to attention and stepped aside to allow the Queen to address them directly. Camilla moved closer to the formation, close enough that her voice would carry to every soldier without the need for amplification. The crowd outside the gates sensed that something unusual was happening and pressed closer to the iron railings, straining to hear and see. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Royal Guard," Camilla began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I stand before you today not just as your queen, but as someone who has learned to understand the true meaning of service and sacrifice." The guards remained at attention, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. This was not the typical royal address they were accustomed to hearing. "Each of you has made choices that most people will never have to make. You have left families behind, faced danger in distant lands, and stood ready to give everything for duty and honor. You have protected not just the royal family, but the values and freedoms that define our nation. As she spoke, Camilla's eyes moved from face to face, making personal connections with these individuals who were usually seen as anonymous figures in ceremonial uniforms. Today, I want to do something that has never been done before in the history of our monarchy. I want to show you the respect and recognition that you have earned through your service, your courage, and your unwavering dedication. The Queen paused, and, in that moment of silence, everyone present sensed that they were about to witness something historic. Colonel Harrison shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what was coming next. The guards maintained their positions, but their attention was completely focused on their queen. Behind the palace gates, the crowd had grown quiet, sensing the gravity of the moment even though they couldn't hear the queen's words clearly. News cameras zoomed in, capturing every expression and gesture as this unprecedented scene unfolded. Camilla took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. What she was about to do would break with centuries of royal protocol, but she believed it was the right thing to do. These guards deserved recognition not just as servants of the crown, but as individuals who had earned respect through their actions and sacrifices. The wind carried the scent of autumn leaves across the courtyard as Queen Camilla prepared to make her historic gesture. In the silence that followed, everyone present understood that they were about to witness a moment that would be remembered and talked about for generations to come. The Queen's decision would not only surprise the guards and the watching crowd, but it would also challenge traditional notions of royal protocol and demonstrate a level of humility and respect that would change how people viewed the monarchy itself. This was more than a ceremony, it was a transformation happening in real time, with consequences that would ripple far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. Queen Camilla raised her right hand slowly, her movements deliberate and filled with purpose. The gesture was subtle at first, but, as her hand reached shoulder height, everyone in the courtyard realized what was happening. The Queen was preparing to salute her own guards. This had never happened before in British royal history. Queens and kings received salutes, they did not give them to their subordinates. The protocol had been established over centuries, with clear hierarchical distinctions that defined the relationship between the monarchy and the military. But Camilla was about to shatter that tradition. Colonel Harrison's eyes widened in disbelief. His military training had taught him to expect the unexpected, but this was beyond anything he had ever experienced or imagined. He took a small step forward, as if to intervene, but stopped himself when he saw the determination in the Queen's expression. Sergeant Williams, standing in the front row of guards, felt her heart racing beneath her perfectly pressed uniform. She had been taught that maintaining composure was essential, regardless of circumstances, but this moment was testing every aspect of her training. Her eyes remained fixed straight ahead, but her peripheral vision caught the Queen's approaching salute. The crowd outside the gates had grown completely silent. Even though they couldn't hear the Queen's words clearly, they could see her raised hand and sensed that something extraordinary was taking place. Cell phones appeared throughout the crowd as people began recording what they instinctively knew was a historic moment. News reporters who had come expecting a routine royal appearance were scrambling to understand what they were witnessing. The cameras captured every second as Queen Camilla's hand continued its upward trajectory, moving with the precision and respect of a military salute. Corporal Matthews, the veteran who had recently lost a friend in service, felt emotions stirring that he had kept buried for months. The sight of his queen preparing to honor him and his fellow guards in this unprecedented way touched something deep within him. His throat tightened, but his military bearing remained perfect. As Camilla's hand reached the proper position for a formal military salute, time seemed to slow. The autumn breeze had stilled, as if nature itself was holding its breath for this moment. The Queen's expression was one of deep respect and genuine emotion, far removed from the formal composure typically associated with royal ceremonies. "Guards of the Royal Regiment," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent courtyard, "for your service, your sacrifice, and your unwavering commitment to duty, I salute you." The Queen's salute was perfect in its execution. Her hand positioned correctly, her posture straight, her eyes meeting those of the guards with unmistakable respect. She held the salute for several seconds longer than protocol would typically require, ensuring that every guard could see and understand the significance of her gesture. The reaction from the royal guards was immediate and profound. These disciplined soldiers, trained to maintain composure under any circumstances, struggled to contain their emotions. Several guards felt tears forming in their eyes, though they fought to maintain their military bearing. Sergeant Williams found herself trembling slightly, overwhelmed by the honor being shown to her and her fellow guards. She had joined the military to serve her country and had never expected recognition of this magnitude. The Queen's salute meant more to her than any medal or commendation she had ever received. Colonel Harrison watched in amazement as his guards, these proud and disciplined soldiers, began to show subtle signs of the emotion they were feeling. A slight tremor in a jaw here, a barely perceptible tear there, but their formation remained perfect even as their hearts were being deeply moved. The crowd outside the gates had fallen completely silent, sensing the gravity of what they were witnessing. Even without understanding the specific military protocols being broken, they could see that something unprecedented was happening. The Queen's gesture was being captured by dozens of cameras and would soon be shared around the world. As Queen Camilla held her salute, she thought about all the conversations she had had with military families over the years. She remembered the wives who had worried about their husbands on dangerous deployments, the children who had grown up without their parents during long overseas assignments, and the veterans who had returned home changed by their experiences. The salute lasted nearly 30 seconds, far longer than any ceremonial salute in royal history. When the Queen finally lowered her hand, the silence in the courtyard was profound. No one moved, no one spoke, as everyone processed what had just occurred. But the Queen was not finished. What happened next would shock the guards, the crowd, and eventually the entire world even more than her unprecedented salute. Camilla took a step back and, in a gesture that defied every rule of royal protocol, she bowed her head to the assembled guards. This was not a slight nod of acknowledgement, but a deep, respectful bow that clearly demonstrated her reverence for their service. The guards were stunned. Not only had their queen saluted them, but she was now bowing to them. This reversed every traditional notion of hierarchy and protocol that had governed royal military relations for centuries. Corporal Matthews felt his composure beginning to crack. The combination of the salute and the bow was more recognition than he had ever received in his years of service. He thought about his fallen comrade and wished his friend could have been there to witness this extraordinary moment of honor. The news crews outside the gates were in a state of controlled chaos, with reporters speaking urgently into their microphones, trying to convey the historic nature of what they were witnessing to viewers around the world. This was not just a news story, it was a moment that would be studied and remembered for generations. Queen Camilla straightened from her bow and looked once again at the assembled guards. Her eyes showed a mixture of pride, respect, and genuine affection for these men and women who had dedicated their lives to service. "You have honored me with your service," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, I hope I have honored you in return." The Queen's words hung in the air, and everyone present understood that they had witnessed something that would change the monarchy forever. This was not just about breaking protocol, it was about acknowledging the humanity and sacrifice of those who serve, regardless of rank or position. As Camilla prepared for what would be her final surprise of the ceremony, the guards remained at attention, though their emotions were clearly visible. What their queen would do next would complete a transformation that had begun with a simple decision to show respect where respect was due. The autumn sun had moved higher in the sky, casting new shadows across the courtyard, but the light seemed different now, as if the very atmosphere had changed in response to this unprecedented display of mutual respect between sovereign and subject. After her bow, Queen Camilla did something that sent shockwaves through everyone present. She walked directly to Sergeant Williams, the young woman who had shown exceptional courage in her recent peacekeeping mission, and extended her hand for a handshake. But this was not a formal royal handshake. Instead, Camilla grasped the sergeant's hand with both of hers, holding it firmly while looking directly into her eyes. "Thank you," the Queen said simply, but the emotion in her voice conveyed far more than those two words could express. Sergeant Williams had trained for years to maintain military discipline, but she found herself struggling to maintain composure. Her queen was not just acknowledging her service, she was treating her as an equal, as a fellow human being worthy of the highest respect. "Your Majesty," Williams managed to say, her voice slightly strained with emotion, "it has been my honor to serve." Queen Camilla smiled, a genuine, warm smile that was captured by cameras and would soon be seen around the world. "The honor has been mine," she replied, squeezing the sergeant's hands once more before moving to the next guard in line. Colonel Harrison watched in amazement as his queen continued down the line, personally thanking each guard with the same level of respect and warmth she had shown Sergeant Williams. This was completely unprecedented. Royal protocol had been designed to maintain dignity and distance, but Camilla was deliberately breaking down those barriers. When she reached Corporal Matthews, the veteran who had recently lost a friend, Camilla paused longer than she had with the others. She seemed to sense his pain, the grief he carried for his fallen comrade. Without saying anything initially, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "I know you have lost someone dear to you," she said quietly, her words meant only for him. "Your friend's sacrifice will not be forgotten, and neither will your service in his honor." Corporal Matthews felt tears forming in his eyes despite his best efforts to maintain military bearing. The Queen's words touched a wound that had been festering since his friend's death. To know that his queen understood his loss and acknowledged it personally meant more than any formal ceremony ever could. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with genuine gratitude. As Queen Camilla continued her personal acknowledgement of each guard, the crowd outside the gates began to understand that they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. Word was spreading through social media, with live streams and videos being shared across the globe. The hashtag Queen Salutes was trending within minutes. The international reaction was immediate and overwhelming. In military bases around the world, soldiers stopped what they were doing to watch the footage of their British Queen saluting her own guards. Veterans who had served in joint operations with British forces felt a surge of pride and respect for this unprecedented gesture. Back in the courtyard, Queen Camilla was approaching the final guards in the formation. Each interaction was personal and meaningful, with the Queen taking time to acknowledge not just their service, but their humanity. She asked about families, thanked them for specific missions, and showed a level of personal interest that none of them had ever experienced from a member of the royal family. As she finished her walk down the line, Camilla turned back to address the entire formation once more. The guards had maintained their military bearing throughout her personal acknowledgments, but the emotion was clearly visible on their faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying across the courtyard and somehow reaching the crowd beyond the gates, "what we have shared here today goes beyond ceremony and protocol. It is recognition of a simple truth, that honor and respect should flow not just upward, but in all directions among those who serve with integrity and courage." The Queen's words were being recorded and would soon be analyzed by constitutional experts and historians around the world. She was not just breaking protocol, she was articulating a new philosophy of leadership and respect that challenged traditional hierarchical structures. "Each of you has chosen a path of service that requires sacrifice, courage, and dedication. You have earned not just my gratitude, but my deepest respect. That respect does not diminish my position as your queen, it enhances it, because a true leader recognizes and honors the strength of those they lead." Behind the palace gates, the crowd had grown to several thousand people. News of the unprecedented ceremony had spread through social media, drawing people from across London who wanted to witness history in the making. The atmosphere was electric with excitement and pride. Inside the courtyard, Colonel Harrison found himself completely re-evaluating his understanding of leadership and military protocol. He had served under many commanders throughout his career, but he had never witnessed a leader show such genuine humility and respect for their subordinates while maintaining their authority and dignity. The guards themselves were experiencing a transformation. They had entered the ceremony as disciplined soldiers following orders, but they were discovering that they were valued not just for their obedience, but for their individual contributions and sacrifices. This recognition was changing how they saw themselves and their service. Queen Camilla looked around the courtyard one more time, taking in the faces of the guards, the surprised expressions of the military officials, and the crowd of spectators beyond the gates. She could feel the weight of history in this moment and understood that what she had done would have consequences far beyond this single ceremony. "Before we conclude," she said, her voice taking on a more formal tone that suggested she had one more surprise in store, "I have one final request of you all." The guards straightened even more, if that were possible, while Colonel Harrison stepped forward slightly, curious about what else his queen might have planned. "I would like you to return my salute," Camilla said, raising her right hand once again to the proper position. "Not because protocol demands it, but because we are acknowledging each other as fellow servants of something greater than ourselves." This request was perhaps the most shocking moment of an already unprecedented ceremony. The Queen was asking her guards to salute her not out of obligation, but out of mutual respect. She was creating a moment of equality within a traditionally hierarchical structure. The guards responded immediately and, with perfect precision. Their salute was sharp, crisp, and filled with genuine respect rather than mere duty. For several seconds, Queen and guards held their mutual salute, creating an image that would become iconic in British history. When the salutes were finally lowered, there was a moment of profound silence before something completely unexpected happened. From somewhere in the formation of guards came the sound of spontaneous applause. It started with one person and quickly spread throughout the entire formation, something that would have been unthinkable under normal military protocol. Colonel Harrison made no move to stop the applause. He understood that rules and protocols, no matter how long-standing, sometimes needed to give way to genuine human emotion and recognition. His guards were applauding not just their queen, but the moment they had all shared together. The spontaneous applause from the royal guards created a ripple effect that no one could have anticipated. The sound carried beyond the palace walls, reaching the crowd gathered outside the gates. Even though they couldn't see everything that was happening, they could hear the applause and sense that something extraordinary had occurred. Within moments, the crowd outside began applauding as well. The sound grew from a few scattered claps to a thunderous ovation that echoed through the streets surrounding Buckingham Palace. Tourists, local residents, shopkeepers, and office workers who had stopped to see what was happening all joined in, creating a wave of appreciation that spread through central London. Queen Camilla stood in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by applauding guards and serenaded by the cheers of thousands of people beyond the palace walls. She had expected her gesture to be meaningful, but she hadn't anticipated the emotional response it would generate. Tears formed in her eyes as she realized that her simple act of respect had touched something deep in the hearts of everyone present. The news crews outside the gates were working frantically to capture and transmit every moment. This was no longer just a royal ceremony, it had become a spontaneous celebration of respect, honor, and human dignity. Live broadcasts were interrupting regular programming around the world as the story spread. Colonel Harrison found himself applauding alongside his guards, his own emotions overwhelming his usual military composure. In 30 years of service, he had never experienced anything like this moment. The Queen's gesture had not weakened military discipline, it had strengthened it by acknowledging the humanity of those who serve. Sergeant Williams was openly crying now, though she maintained her military posture. The Queen's recognition of her service, combined with the support and appreciation flowing from the crowd, had touched her more deeply than she had ever imagined possible. She thought about calling her family to tell them what had happened, knowing they would never believe the story without seeing the footage themselves. Corporal Matthews felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. The Queen's personal acknowledgement of his friend's sacrifice and her recognition of his own service had provided a healing that formal ceremonies and medals had never achieved. For the first time since his friend's death, he felt truly understood and appreciated. As the applause continued, Queen Camilla raised her hand to acknowledge the crowd's response. This simple gesture caused the cheering to intensify even further. The Queen then did something else that surprised everyone. She waved not with the formal royal wave that people were accustomed to seeing, but with the enthusiastic, genuine wave of someone who was truly moved by the response she was receiving. The impact of the ceremony was already being felt far beyond London. Military bases around the world were receiving calls from service members who had seen the footage online. Veterans organizations were posting messages of gratitude and respect. Social media was flooded with comments from military families expressing appreciation for the Queen's unprecedented gesture. In the United States, a retired Marine Corps general posted a video response saying, "In 30 years of military service, I have never seen a more powerful demonstration of leadership and respect. Queen Camilla has shown the world what it means to truly honor those who serve." Similar messages were coming from military leaders in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and dozens of other countries. The Queen's gesture had transcended national boundaries, touching military personnel and veterans worldwide who felt that their service had been acknowledged in a way that formal ceremonies and speeches never achieved. Back at Buckingham Palace, the ceremony was reaching its natural conclusion, but the effects were just beginning. Queen Camilla approached Colonel Harrison, who was still struggling to process what had just occurred. "Colonel," she said, her voice warm but carrying the authority that befitted her position, "I hope you understand that what happened here today was not a rejection of military protocol, but rather an expansion of it. Respect and honor should never be constrained by tradition when that tradition fails to acknowledge the full dignity of those who serve." Colonel Harrison straightened to attention before responding. "Your Majesty, what you have done today has given new meaning to the concept of service and leadership. These guards will carry this moment with them for the rest of their lives, and it will make them better soldiers and better people." The Queen smiled and nodded before turning to address the guards one final time. The applause had died down, but the energy and emotion in the courtyard remained palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Royal Guard," she said, her voice carrying clearly to every person present, "you came here today as my subjects, following orders and performing your duties as you have been trained to do. But you leave here today as something more. You leave as individuals whose service has been acknowledged, whose sacrifices have been recognized, and whose contributions to our nation have been honored in the way they deserve." The Queen paused, looking around the courtyard once more before continuing. "When people ask you about this day, I hope you will tell them that respect is not diminished when it is shared, but rather multiplied. Tell them that true leadership requires the courage to break with tradition when tradition no longer serves the greater good. And tell them that a queen who salutes her guards is not less royal, but more human." These words would be quoted in newspapers, analyzed by political scientists, and remembered by historians as marking a turning point in how the British monarchy related to those who served it. Queen Camilla had not just broken protocol, she had established a new standard for leadership based on mutual respect and recognition of human dignity. As the ceremony officially concluded, the guards began to disperse, but not before each one had the opportunity to personally thank their queen once more. The line that formed was not mandated by protocol, it was entirely voluntary, created by guards who wanted to express their gratitude for what had been the most meaningful moment of their military careers. The crowd outside the gates was also beginning to disperse, but slowly and reluctantly. Many people sensed that they had witnessed something historic and were hesitant to leave. Street vendors appeared selling newspapers with hastily printed headlines about the unprecedented ceremony. Souvenir shops began creating memorabilia featuring images of the Queen's salute. Queen Camilla remained in the courtyard long past the scheduled end of the ceremony, taking time to speak personally with guards, military officials, and staff members. She seemed energized by the experience, as if the emotional response to her gesture had validated something she had long believed about the importance of acknowledging the service and sacrifice of others. As the afternoon wore on and the immediate excitement of the ceremony began to settle, it became clear that the effects of Queen Camilla's unprecedented gesture would continue to ripple outward in ways that no one could fully predict or control. In the days following the ceremony, the impact of Queen Camilla's unprecedented gesture continued to grow and spread across the globe. Within 24 hours, the video of her saluting the royal guards had been viewed over 50 million times across various social media platforms. News organizations from every continent were calling it the salute heard round the world and a royal revolution. The British government found itself fielding calls from diplomatic missions worldwide, all seeking to understand the implications of the Queen's actions. Prime Minister's office released a statement saying, "Her Majesty's gesture reflects the deep respect and gratitude that our nation feels for all those who serve in our armed forces." This was a powerful reminder that honor and respect transcend protocol and tradition. But perhaps the most significant impact was felt within military communities themselves. At the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, cadets were discussing the ceremony in their dormitories late into the night. For many young people preparing for military careers, Queen Camilla's gesture represented a new model of leadership that valued mutual respect over rigid hierarchy. Lieutenant Sarah Chan, a recent graduate who had been deployed to Eastern Europe, watched the footage on her phone while on duty. "I've served under many commanding officers," she told her fellow soldiers, "but I've never seen anyone in authority show that level of genuine respect for their subordinates. It makes me proud to serve, knowing that our Queen understands what we sacrifice." The story was having an equally powerful effect on veterans. At a rehabilitation center in Manchester, former soldiers who had been struggling with post-traumatic stress and feelings of being forgotten by society watched the ceremony together. Many reported feeling, for the first time in years, that their service had been truly acknowledged and appreciated. James Morrison, a veteran who had lost his leg in Afghanistan, wiped tears from his eyes as he watched Queen Camilla bow to the guards. "I've been to dozens of ceremonies and received multiple medals," he said, "but I've never seen anything that showed such genuine understanding of what we go through. This Queen gets it. She really gets it." The international military community was equally moved. In Washington, D.C., the Pentagon released an unprecedented statement praising Queen Camilla's gesture. "Her Majesty has demonstrated a level of leadership and respect for military service that serves as an example to leaders worldwide," the statement read. "This is what it looks like when someone in authority truly understands the value of those who serve under them." Messages of support poured in from military leaders across the Commonwealth. The Canadian Chief of Defence Staff posted a video message saying, "Queen Camilla's salute to her guards represents the kind of leadership that every service member hopes to see from their commanders. It was an honor to witness such a powerful demonstration of respect and recognition." Back at Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla was receiving thousands of letters from military families, veterans, and active service members from around the world. Her private secretary had to organize additional staff just to handle the overwhelming response. The letters told stories of sacrifice, loss, and service, with each writer expressing gratitude for the Queen's unprecedented gesture of respect. One letter that particularly moved the Queen came from Margaret Thompson, an elderly woman from Scotland whose son had been killed in action 3 years earlier. "Your Majesty," the letter read, "when I saw you salute those guards, I felt like you were saluting my son too. For the first time since we lost him, I felt like someone in authority truly understood what he gave for his country. Thank you for honoring all of our children who serve." The ceremony also had unexpected effects on the Royal Guard itself. Recruitment inquiries increased by over 300% in the weeks following the ceremony. Young people who had never considered military service were inspired by the level of respect and recognition they had witnessed. The idea of serving under a monarch who clearly valued and appreciated her guards appealed to a new generation of potential recruits. Sergeant Williams found herself at the center of media attention as reporters sought to understand the guards' perspective on the ceremony. In a carefully arranged interview, she spoke about the impact of the Queen's gesture. "It changed how I see my service," she explained. "I always knew that what we do was important, but to have our Queen acknowledge us in that way, to show such personal respect, it gave new meaning to everything we do." Colonel Harrison was asked to address military colleges and leadership schools about the ceremony. His presentation, titled "Leadership Through Respect," became one of the most requested military leadership talks in the world. What Queen Camilla demonstrated, he would tell audiences, is that true authority is strengthened, not weakened, when it acknowledges the value and dignity of those it leads. The ceremony also sparked academic discussions about leadership, protocol, and the evolution of monarchy in the modern world. Constitutional scholars noted that Queen Camilla had managed to break with centuries of tradition while actually strengthening the institution of monarchy by making it more relatable and human. Professor Elizabeth Hartwell of Oxford University wrote in her analysis, "Queen Camilla's salute represents a masterclass in modern leadership. She demonstrated that acknowledging the humanity and contributions of those who serve under you doesn't diminish your authority, it enhances it by creating genuine loyalty based on mutual respect rather than mere obligation." The ripple effects extended far beyond military circles. In corporations around the world, executives began to reconsider their own leadership styles. Business schools started using the ceremony as a case study in effective leadership, focusing on how Queen Camilla had maintained her authority while showing unprecedented respect for her subordinates. 6 months after the ceremony, Queen Camilla established the Royal Recognition Initiative, a program designed to personally acknowledge the service and sacrifices of military personnel and their families. The program included regular visits to military bases, hospitals treating wounded veterans, and meetings with military families who had lost loved ones in service. The initiative became a model for royal engagement that was adopted by other monarchies and heads of state around the world. The idea that leaders should personally and meaningfully acknowledge those who serve them became known as the Camilla Standard, a term that entered leadership textbooks and military training programs globally. 1 year after the ceremony, Queen Camilla returned to Buckingham Palace for a follow-up event with the royal guards. This time, the ceremony was planned from the beginning to include mutual salutes and personal recognition. What had begun as an unprecedented break with protocol had become a new tradition, one that reflected a more modern and human approach to leadership and respect. As she stood once again before the assembled guards, Queen Camilla reflected on how a simple decision to show respect had changed not only her own understanding of leadership but had touched lives around the world. The ceremony that had shocked the crowd had become a defining moment of her reign, demonstrating that sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is to acknowledge the power and dignity of those they lead. The guards who stood before her now included some familiar faces from that first ceremony, but also new faces representing a new generation of service members who had been inspired to serve partly because of the respect and recognition they had witnessed their queen show to their predecessors. The crowd beyond the gates was larger than ever, filled with people who wanted to witness what had become an annual celebration of mutual respect between sovereign and subject. The tradition that had begun with one queen's decision to break protocol had evolved into something much larger, a new understanding of what it means to serve and to lead with honor, dignity, and genuine respect for human worth. In the end, Queen Camilla's unprecedented salute had done more than shock a crowd. It had inspired a new model of leadership that would influence military services, corporations, and government institutions for generations to come. Her simple gesture of respect had proven that true power lies not in demanding deference, but in recognizing the value and dignity of every person who contributes to something greater than themselves.